welcoming remarks, I should say. Mirabelle Stoedter is the Vice President and Treasurer of the Nashville chapter of the Americans United for Separation of Church and State. The AU is the only organization in the U.S. devoted entirely to church-state issues for the past 75 years. She's been involved in writing about and defending LGBTQ+ people, abortion rights, and people of color against attacks by Christian nationalists who perpetuate the myth that America is a Christian nation and should follow a specific brand of Christianity. Her activism began in South Africa during the days of the apartheid regime. Now she's also on the board of the Nashville Peace and Justice Center, and she's a member of the Nashville Nashville Organized for Action and Hope, all of which serve the Middle Tennessee area. Please join me in welcoming Mirabelle Stoedter to the stand.
Hi, and thank you for being here. I'm Mir. My pronouns are her, she, her, and hers. And I would like to talk to you today about my journey from apartheid to activism. It all started, my journey started in Rhodesia and Southern Rhodesia. There we go. I'm a little flustered. I came in late, so give me a second. So my journey started in Northern and Southern Rhodesia, where I went from kindergarten to high school, then on to technical college, where we played with politics, staged a few half-hearted protests and walkouts in support of rights for Black people. This was, advanced slide, please. This was my Rhodesia. We lived in cities. Advance. We had natural wonders inaccessible to most people. We visited tributes to colonialism and lived a suburban life. We also had the Anglican Church. The Anglican Church was the state religion. It permeated every aspect of life, from prayers and hymns in schools and at every public gathering, even some private gatherings where there were dignitaries. Conditions for Black people, however, weren't as good, weren't as bad as in South Africa, but the principles were separate but equal. White people, called Europeans, had Black servants, even those like my family who were lower middle class. Servants worked 6 days a week, long hours, and lived in outbuildings with few amenities, such as hot running water. Ironically, in school, we learned US history and about emancipation and slavery. Some Black people were lucky enough to live in government-sponsored housing, but many lived in extreme poverty, especially in the countryside. This that you see here is a whitewashed version of how Black people lived. These were very few and far between. Moving on to South Africa, where 25 million Black people were ruled by 3 million white people, everyone was assigned a race. You were either white, Indian, colored, or Black African. Subclassifications were created to accommodate others, such as other Asians. But in general, you were either a white person or a non-white person. Actually, you were either a white or a non-white. Usually person was not attached to these nomenclatures. This was my South Africa. Cities, suburban life, natural wonders, and the Dutch Reformed Church. Advance, please. The Dutch Reformed Church was system of apartheid. From a religious fundamentalist point of view, it was racist, oppressive, and prevalent in all aspects of private and public life. They preached that Black people had no souls. Abortion and gay sex, of course, were illegal. The 1957 Immorality Act criminalized, amongst other things, all extramarital sexual relations between a white person and a non-white person. Interracial marriages had been banned several years before that. The penalty for breaking these laws was up to 7 years in prison. And believe me, you did not want to be in a South African prison. The reality for Black people were not being allowed to use amenities such as beaches, public parks, and so on. Separate drinking fountains and separate bathrooms were also an aspect of the life there. It led to, in 1980s, Black homelands were created, reminiscent of Indian reservations. Theoretically, this would create a separate but equal society. For white people, activism usually meant leaving the country with the police one step behind them or being arrested. Some of us practiced a quiet subversion, making sure people close to us had decent accommodation and had equality and fairness in working conditions. But we were constantly afraid of that knock on the door late at night. Censorship ensured that we knew very little of what was happening outside our little bubble, until satellite and limited cable TV were launched. Now you can see why I later became a proponent of religious freedom. Advance, please. So here we are. We arrived with an idealized version of what it was going to be like. The reality was definitely a surprise, not quite the egalitarian society that we were led to believe. We started off in Arizona, where my son was a high school freshman in a magnet program, the International Baccalaureate. The program was 100% white kids in a school that had 80% Black students. We were just surviving, but we realized how better off we were than many. Later in New Jersey, my agitation started. I began to become involved in voting, registering people to vote, and working for animal shelters. It was after moving to Tennessee and retiring from my job that my job became activism. Organizations I belong to include NPJC, which is an umbrella organization covering civil rights and anti-racism, LGBT plus rights, democracy, good governance, and anti-fascism, affordable housing, and more. NOAA is a coalition of congregations, community organizations, and labor unions fighting racism in education, affordable housing, criminal justice, and encouraging voter engagement. Advance, please. I am the Vice President of Americans United for Separation of Church and State, which I will talk about a little bit later. I work for liberal causes. I try to stay on top of current legislation, both state and federal, with the help of Americans United. I phone bank, write letters, participate in voter registration in drives, and protest, the most important thing that I believe we can do. Tennessee refused Medicaid expansion and is discussing rejecting $1.2 billion worth of federal education funding. and another $750 million of federal grants. So the federal government will not have any oversight in the education system. In Tennessee, many counties have no shelters, allows cats to roam free and dogs to be chained outside 24/7. I work with organizations to lobby local and state governments to change laws. And religious freedom. Advance, please. Advance. And again, thank you. Tennessee loses millions in federal funding for family planning aid, and it will return federal funding for HIV prevention programs. It restricts voting rights. It takes public funds from public schools to fund religious schools that discriminate. Which brings us to the topic of religious freedom. American United fight for church-state separation, which I will tell you about shortly. But first, I would like to speak about religious freedom, who wants to defeat it, and why it matters. The government should not support religion, and religion should not interfere with government. America is not a Christian nation. America is a nation of equal opportunity. The wall of separation between church and state is an American original. It's an American invention that was first implemented in the American experiment. Until then, no other nation had sought to protect the people's right to think freely by separating religion and government. Ulysses S. Grant said, "Keep the church and state forever separate." What does religious freedom matter? It protects the most devout believer to the most committed atheist and everybody in between. It ensures all people are treated the same. It's a fundamental human right that government should not violate or misuse to discriminate or exclude. A medical professional refusing to treat a patient in crisis. A baker refusing to bake a cake. An employer firing an employee in a same-sex marriage. And an adoption agency refusing an LGBT couple. A clerk refusing to issue a marriage license, or a teacher refusing to use preferred pronouns. Who are these people that want to take away these rights? They are white Christian nationalists, religious fundamentalists who want to control everyone who is not a white conservative cis male. Groups such as ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, and Project Bliss, incorporating more than 40 radically conservative groups, have written a playbook of legislations for the states to follow. If you take a look at legislation in different states, they're almost word for word the same. Millions of dollars, billions maybe of dollars are given to these PACs, but we wouldn't know because they're allowed to be private. Tennessee is first in the nation in discrimination. You hear a lot about Florida and Texas, but Tennessee is first. We have discriminatory laws in adoption, in public school bathrooms, healthcare, such as a ban on all forms of gender-affirming care for transgender people under 18, sports, banning transgender athletes, Pronouns, protecting teachers who don't use a student's preferred pronouns. Of course, drag, everyone's heard about that one. Drag shows are becoming a primary target, and in marriage. In Tennessee, this is okay. In Tennessee, this is okay. But in Tennessee, this is not allowed. Who are the ones exploiting children? Who are the ones that are making children unsafe? My favorite organization is Americans United for Separation of Church and State. With 75 years of activism, it's the only organization devoted solely to church-state separation and religious freedom. Americans United often resolves constitutional issues without litigation, with correspondence, and so on. It litigates when necessary and works with the White House and legislators on policy. They were instrumental in the Respect of Marriage Act. Together with other organizations, they pushed for the passing of this law. And if you look at what it does, you see that it's unbelievable that interracial marriage is still on the books in some states. AU continues to press for the Do No Harm Act, to alleviate the use of the 1993 Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or RFRA, which is used to discriminate. For example, it was used to ban Muslims during the Trump administration. Recently, a federal judge in Texas, quoting RFRA, ruled that requiring employers to provide the HIV prevention drug PrEP violates the employer's religious freedom. It needs to go. Some AU litigation, Rutan Ram, who are suing an adoption agency for discrimination. Kennedy, which was about prayer in schools. Unfortunately, this case was lost in the Supreme Court with this new activist Supreme Court that we have. And guess what? The coach is back at it. And Fitzgerald, where there was discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. AU is challenging Missouri's abortion bans, which quoted the Bible in the actual legislation. What can you do? Do we have sound?
Religious freedom is not a license to discriminate.
Can we advance, please? There we go.
Religious freedom.
We went back.
Religious freedom is not.
No, I'm going backwards. Could you? Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, we can watch this lovely slide again. I'm pressing the green button, sir. Going, keep going, keep going. And more, and one more. Thank you. The Summit for Religious Freedom is being worked by Americans United for Separation of Church and State, but will include many other organizations. There is a virtual option And Americans United Nashville are offering scholarships for the Zoom virtual attendance. Please go to nashville-au.org to sign up for the scholarships. If you think you have witnessed or experienced a violation of your rights, please contact au.org. They will be very happy to hear about your problems and they will try to help you out. And a thing that I don't have a slide for, vote. People, vote. This is the most important thing that you can do. I know that it seems hopeless in the southern states like Florida, Tennessee, and Texas. But if we all work together, we can do this. We can at least get a bigger representation in our states. Please go to vote.gov to get your information or to see if you're registered or to register. Please tell your family and friends that if you're 17, you can register to vote. The rules are different in different states, but as long as they are 18 at the date of election, they can vote. Please contact myself or Americans United or Nashville AU. You have my personal email address up there. Please feel free to contact me. And on social media, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and still on Twitter. But if anybody is interested in helping us get on TikTok, please contact me because we'd love to be on there. All right, thank you very much.